Winter has returned to the canals of Great Britain, and that seems to mean I get a lot more comments and questions on my previous videos about narrowboat life during the winter time, especially surrounding the ever popular topic of heating a canal boat in the chilly times of year, and the misconception that if it's very cold outside of the boat, that's going to translate to it being very cold inside the boat. And I often give the simple answer about if you've got a wood burner or coal fire going inside the boat, the sheer volume of heat something like that can throw out, well, in such a small space and low ceiling environment as the canal boat, means it can be very often too hot on the canal boat and lead you to have to open the windows even if it's sub-zero temperatures outside. But there's a lot more to it than just that, and it's more curious and I suppose slightly more interesting than the very brief answers that I can give replying in comments via text on this topic. One of the big questions that I get is how much does it cost to heat the boat throughout a winter? And obviously there's a lot of variables in something like that, so it's impossible to ever give one solid answer. Depending on how mild or harsh the winter is, of course, depending on how many people are on the boat, whether you go out to work for multiple hours on the weekdays and you don't need the boat to be piping hot during that time, if you're on the boat full time with multiple people to keep warm. Obviously, there's a huge amount of variables. However, it's even more nuanced and slightly more interesting than just the obvious things at face value. And this is really what I want to discuss here for a brief moment, and that is even something as simple as where you have got the boat moored up and whether it's a cloudy day but quite mild or a really chilly day but sunny can have surprising influences on how warm the boat is and how much fuel you have to top the fire up with, if at all. I have myself got many examples and experiences of being able to leave the fire well alone on a very chilly day for hours on end, as opposed to having to continually top it up on a slightly warmer day, purely based on my mooring spot. For example, if I am moored up at somewhere such as St Martin's, where you haven't got trees lining the canal edge, so they're not blocking the sunlight out, it's a very low horizon and very flat ground, so you don't have even nearby rolling hills to rob you of that warming, life-giving sunlight. So the sun can come up on a chilly day, there can be frost on the ground, and it can just be beating down on the metal panels of my poorly insulated boats of years gone by, and of course streaming in through the windows, creating a modest greenhouse effect and very slowly and subtly keeping the boat nice and warm. And it really is just like a greenhouse. Many of us have probably stepped foot in somebody's greenhouse in their garden in years gone by, and you'll probably know that you can very often be shocked as you slide the door open and feel that wall of heat that's coming out of purely just a little glass room with no other heat source than the sun itself. And so that's equally as effective in a car, for example. We've probably all gone back to a car on a sunny day, opened the door and been absolutely horrified that it is unbelievably warm and we've now got to sit in there with the fans blowing in our faces. Same concept, but just during the winter, obviously a little bit more noticeable if you're living in that sort of an environment. So equally, as I say, you could have a much milder day, but if you're moored up at, say, the back of Chirk Tunnel, where you've got steep sides, you've got trees covering the canal, you're not going to be getting that natural sunlight hitting you for very long in comparison. Or if it's a clouded over day and you're not getting any of that light at all, the boat isn't getting that natural warming effect from the sun. And so obviously the interior and the exterior, depending on your level of glazing and insulation, is going to find itself trying to even out the temperature over the course of the day. So it might lead you to be pumping a little bit more fuel through into that fire. By that I mean just putting wood and coal in my example. Of course, the layout of the boat and many other things like that play a huge part. So, for example, if you've got a boat with a fireplace at one end and that's as far away from your bedroom as possible, you may be finding yourselves stacking that fire with a huge amount of fuel and having little fans running to try and cycle the warm air throughout the boat. Or you might have that sort of setup and then a small radiator in the bedroom so that you don't have to go through that huge pre-bedtime dump of coal and fuel into the fireplace. And these are, as I say, the sorts of things that people have to figure out themselves, really. If you were to buy a boat right now, or if you were to dump me down on a random boat that I'd never been on before, that had a layout completely different to the central fireplace layouts that I've previously lived on, I would have to take at least a couple of weeks and various weather conditions to fully start to get to grips with how much fuel needs to be put in the fire at what time and all of that sort of stuff. I've put together a little video, which I'll put on here, don't worry, it's not long, which is just literally examples of exterior and interior temperatures on my boats in years gone by. So let's just see that. Just how cold can a narrowboat get during the winter? Well, if the weather outdoors looks like this, but the fire indoors looks like this, prepare for some potentially ridiculous temperatures, such as -3 degrees at midnight outdoors, but 30 degrees on the boat. Equally, we can wake up in the morning sometimes, 8 degrees outside, 6 AM, the fire's burnt all night, it's still 25 degrees. So don't be deceived by scenes like this on the canal. Okay then, another example. We're at the car, it's 10:30, -0.5 degree, ice on the bonnet, but 30 foot away in the boat, you guessed it, it's still 25 degrees. Because of the incredibly low ceilings and small area to heat inside the boat, and the epic heat output from a log burner, it's amazing just how warm it can be in the harshest of chilly conditions out on the canal. And that really sums up that if you want, you can have the boat really hot and too hot, as I say, regardless of the temperature outside. Or if you're more moderate, or let the fire die out by accident, such as falling asleep in the living room in front of a toasty fire, of course you could wake up to a very chilly boat, or just a much more reasonable temperature to live and exist in than what I sometimes have found myself bobbing and puffing and sweating away in. So anyway, that's just a few thoughts on the nuances that go beyond the obvious things that influence the temperature of a boat and how much fuel you need to put in it and all that sort of stuff. So thank you very much for tuning in. If you're curious and want to help me out, please consider checking out my books about boat life, available for the Kindle and as a paperback, and even one as a little audiobook I recorded. If you really want to help me out, please consider checking out my Patreon, patreon.com/sortofinteresting. It's got loads of free stuff posted there. It's not just a subscription thing, so please treat that as just a normal website as much as anything else. And until the next time, my friends, have an absolutely fantastic day. Keep it interesting, keep it boat worthy, and well, until the next time, farewell.